YouTube fam, welcome to Talking Crime. My name is Gina Marie Bova, and this is where I like to come to discuss solved and unsolved true crime cases, true crime facts and statistics, and missing person cases that I don't feel have gotten enough attention from mainstream media. If you're interested in everything true crime like I am, then you've definitely come to the right place. I do hope that you will choose to subscribe to this channel, and if you hit that little bell next to the subscribe button, YouTube's going to notify you whenever I upload new content. Quick warning before we get started, my videos are not for children, and they're not made for those with weak stomachs or those who are easily triggered or offended. I do not censor my language. I talk about true crimes here, so many of the details that I give and photos that I show are going to be graphic in nature. It's the nature of the beast. Viewer discretion is most definitely advised. Today I'm going to tell you about two extreme cases of babysitters that murdered the children in their care. Buckle up fam, this is going to be a rough one. Now most parents at one time or another decide to use the services of a babysitter. The whole point of this video is not to scare you off from that or to tell you not to hire a babysitter at all. I've yet to meet a parent, including myself, who never needed to utilize the services of a nanny, babysitter, daycare, or whatever, at one time or another. Life happens, and sometimes you just can't bring your children. The point of this video is actually just to remind everybody not to get too comfortable, don't get complacent, always pay attention to what's happening with your children. We can't keep them safe 100% of the time, but we sure can take extra precautions. So let's get started.
The next day.
Marina Michaela Lindsay was born in April of 1976 and was raised in North Manhattan Beach, California. And she graduated from USC and worked as a pediatrician. She met Kevin Grimm at a restaurant in Venice, California, and they got married in 2001. Then they moved to San Francisco, where they started their little family. In 2009, they packed up and moved to New York City and got an apartment in Manhattan's affluent Upper West Side. By 2010, Kevin had become the general manager of the digital media division at CNBC, and the Crims had 3 children together. The 3 children were, at that time, 4-year-old Lucia, whose nickname was Lulu, 3-year-old Inez, whose nickname was Nessie, and their newborn son, Leo. Kevin's job required him to work really long hours, and he often had to travel for work as well. But when he would be able to come home, he noticed that Marina really had her hands full. I mean, she was raising 3 kids practically alone, right? So Kevin suggested that they hired somebody to ease her workload a little bit. They had a friend who had employed a live-in nanny, and that nanny suggested that the Crims consider hiring her sister, who she said was an experienced babysitter that was currently looking for work. Shortly after receiving what seemed to be her very well-qualified resume, the Crims hired 48-year-old Yoselyn Ortega. Ortega was originally from the Dominican Republic. She had immigrated to the United States years prior. When she moved to the U.S., she had to leave her son behind to stay with her parents in the Dominican Republic until she was settled and financially stable enough to have him join her. She was hired on as the Crims babysitter, like I said, and she was given a part-time schedule of about 25 hours a week at first. As time went by, Ortega's son was able to join her in the States. It seemed that Yoselyn and Marina genuinely took to each other really well. They seemed to like each other. The kids seemed to like Ortega as well, and she seemed to love the children. After some time, Ortega would feel comfortable enough to periodically begin complaining to Marina about her financial issues that had arisen from her son showing up. He was 17 years old at this point, and she was sending him to private school, and there was another mouth to feed, and she was just stressed out by it, and she would complain about the financial burden to Marina. She would say that things like she couldn't afford the lifestyle that she was living before her son joined her, and she would just every time she got a chance, would complain about this. And she couldn't afford the life that she was living. So she decided to pack up her belongings and her son and move in with her sister, who also lived in New York. And her sister had a daughter, so it would have been the four of them in this apartment. It was her sister, her sister's child, Ortega, and her son. Okay, and like I said, she would complain a lot about this. And Marina, she's a really sweet lady, and she was trying to be helpful. She suggested that they add more hours and responsibilities to Ortega's schedule so that she could help her earn some extra money that she kept insisting that she needed. And Ortega didn't say as much out loud, but she was expecting a raise, not more hours and more responsibility. She wasn't wanting a bigger workload. She just wanted more money. But outwardly, she was grateful for the extra hours and more responsibility. Inwardly, though, she was pissed. The Crims are said to have paid Ortega very, very fair wages. They paid her pretty well. They gave her cash bonuses. They gave her paid vacation time. They even paid for her vacations. Shit, that year, they went on a vacation to the Dominican Republic, and they took her with them. So as a family vacation, so that she could go and visit her family members that she had left when she came to the U.S. I mean, all the pictures showed everybody happy and getting along, and it was just perfect. The whole relationship seemed perfect, and I wish I could end this story on that note, but unfortunately, I can't. It wouldn't be a show if it ended on that note, and I'd be cool with that, but that's not how it worked out. Although outwardly Ortega seemed to be happy, inside she was feeling nothing but rage and contempt. She was pissed off that she had to work for the extra money that she needed. Even though she never asked for a raise, that's what she expected to be offered to her. She was pissed off that the Crims weren't home more often with their children like she thought they should be. She was pissed that she was stuck wiping noses and chasing kids around, changing diapers, while she imagined the Crims out there having all the fun, living it up, and just living the good life, you know. She hated cleaning. She later said this, quote, "She wanted me to clean. I am a babysitter, not a maid. But then I would clean, and she was never happy with how I did it." Unquote. When she was working, Ortega would often daydream and fantasize about all the different ways that she could destroy their lives. She especially, for some reason, wanted to hurt Marina, and she wanted to make her suffer in the most unimaginable ways. As a mother, parent, just as a human being. Obviously, getting a different job or talking to Marina about what was wrong never crossed her fucking mind. October 22nd, 2012, Ortega supposedly had some kind of mental breakdown in the apartment that she shared with her sister. It said that she threw dishes and broke things off the wall, that she trashed the apartment, and then later couldn't remember any of it. I say supposedly because, and I'm just thinking out loud here, but it seems to me that she was just setting the stage for her future defense. It's just my opinion. I don't know this for a fact, but more about that in a little bit. Jumping forward to October 25th, Ortega gets ready for work. She gathered up her things. She gathered up her cell phone, passport, and some other important items and put them in a bag, and then hung that bag on the doorknob of the apartment on her way out. Again, setting things up for later. Not quite sure what the whole purpose of that was. She was getting her affairs in order, is what the prosecutor later said. She knew what that day's schedule was supposed to be like. Okay, it was pretty much like any other average day that she had to work over there. At this time, Nessie was 3, Lulu was 6, and Leo had just recently turned 2 years old, okay? Lulu was taking ballet classes a couple blocks away from the apartment, the Crimson's apartment, okay? And Nessie was taking swimming lessons at the YMCA. The plan for the day was for Marina to take Nessie to her swim practice, and that would be in turn leaving Lulu and Leo with Ortega. And later that afternoon, late afternoon, early evening, I guess it would be late afternoon, Ortega would take Lulu to her ballet classes that was, like I said, a couple blocks away, and then go back to the apartment with Leo and wait there, take care of Leo, clean up, so forth. And then on the way back from Nessie's swim practice, Marina was planning on taking Nessie, bringing her home, and on the way home, she was going to pick up Lulu from her ballet classes. Ortega had different plans, though. So here comes 5:30. Marina and Nessie show up to pick up Lulu, and she didn't see her anywhere. She finds out from the instructor that they had never shown up. No call, no show, nothing. She hadn't heard anything about it. So that was confusing. That was the first time that had happened. And Marina tried to get a hold of Ortega, and there was no answer. So she texted her a few times, trying to figure out where they were or what was going on. She had a bad feeling that something bad had happened to one of the kids, or she wasn't sure what, but with not getting a response from Ortega, it really made that bad feeling worse. So she picked up Nessie and hoofed it as fast as she could to the apartment to go and check on them. And when she went upstairs, her and Nessie walked into the apartment. It was dark, all but a dim light that came out from underneath a bathroom door all the way at the end of the hall. Marina noticed that it was eerily quiet. It's never that quiet when you have little ones, and if you have little ones, getting peace and quiet at any time is just a miracle. So that just really made that bad feeling even worse. And so she slowly made her way down the hall with Nessie and took a pause before opening that bathroom door because, like I said, she had this bad feeling and she wasn't sure what she was going to walk into. And what she did walk into, she could have never prepared herself for. She opened the door, and what she saw was our mother's worst nightmare. There was blood everywhere. She saw Lulu first. She was in the bathtub, covered in blood. Her little dress was covered with blood. She was staring off, but obviously she had passed away. And when her mind came to grips with what she was looking at, she looked over and saw in the bathtub as well, little Leo was also covered in blood and not breathing, neither were making a sound. And apparently when she realized what she was looking at, she spotted Ortega, who was sitting next to the tub, and Ortega spotted her. She didn't acknowledge her presence, but she grabbed a knife that was bloodied and began slicing her own neck and wrists and stabbing herself. Marina snatched Nessie up, ran her into another room, called 911. She's screaming. She's frantic. She just saw her baby's dead. She called 911. Neighbors, a man and his 12-year-old son, heard her screams, and they came rushing over. And they would later testify about the grisly scene that they had encountered that day. First responders soon arrived on scene. One later stated that what they saw in that apartment will stay with him forever. Another stated that this was the worst crime scene he had ever witnessed in his 20-plus year career. Ortega was still alive, but barely, so they had to rush her off to the hospital, where unfortunately they were able to save her pathetic life. The children were so tiny that they were both placed together on a single gurney, and they were also taken to a hospital. Even though they were both very obviously deceased, the paramedics performed CPR on their lifeless bodies all the way to the hospital. Marina and Nessie were in shock, understandably distraught. They were taken outside and ultimately to the hospital, where Lulu and Leo had been pronounced dead upon arrival. Marina attempted to call Kevin, but he was on a flight home from work. When the plane landed, officers boarded and immediately escorted him off the plane before they let anybody else get off the plane. They had the difficult task of telling Kevin that 2 of his 3 children had been murdered by the babysitter. Upon hearing the news of what happened to his children, Kevin collapsed in agony. To this day, he still can't remember if he walked or if he had been carried out of the airport. He was taken to the hospital to meet up with his wife. The doctor came into the room and did inform them that both children had been pronounced dead upon arrival. It was said that there was no way to save them. The damage was way too severe. Both children had been stabbed to death, and both of their throats were cut with such force that they were nearly decapitated. Apparently, Leo was asleep when he was attacked from behind. First, his throat was cut, and then he was stabbed 5 more times to make sure that he died. He was then put into the bathtub where he would bleed out. Next, Ortega went after Lulu. Lulu saw it coming and she attempted to get away, but Ortega caught her, slit her throat so that she couldn't scream for help. Lulu fought back until she just couldn't anymore. In addition to her neck being cut, she had been stabbed over 30 times. She had defensive wounds on her arms and hands. She was cut in the front of her body, the back of her body. Ortega would say that she cut both of their throats with that kind of force because she didn't want them to be able to scream for help. Lulu was then placed into the tub with her brother to bleed out as well. The level of pain and fear that those babies had to endure during the last minutes of their lives, I can't imagine. I do find a tiny bit of comfort knowing that they passed away with each other by their side, but very little comfort. It would be 5 long years before Yoselyn Ortega went on trial. She spent that time incarcerated in a psychiatric hospital. She had been indicted for 2 counts of first-degree murder, and her defense tried to convince the jury that they needed to find her not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect, because supposedly she had no memory of stabbing the children or herself that day, yet she was able to say that she cut their throats so they wouldn't scream. Now, how she could remember that and nothing else, I'm not quite sure. The judge, upon hearing and reading what the case was about, I don't know where they were going with it as far as the defense. The judge really didn't want the Crims to have to go through a trial. He really didn't. So he offered Ortega a deal. He offered her 30 years in prison with a chance to parole in exchange for a guilty plea. And she turned him down. Ortega was sure that she would not be found guilty. If you saw the look on her face, I believe I have a couple pictures. And if I do, I will put them up right about now. The smug, arrogant fucking look on her face throughout the trial. So frustrating and infuriating. But she really believed that she was going to get off just with a slap on the hand, going to a psychiatric facility until she was deemed not a threat to herself or others. She had it planned out from the beginning. But ultimately, the jury wasn't buying the insanity defense one bit. Thank goodness for that. And they found her guilty on 2 counts of murder in the first degree. She didn't react when they read the verdict. She just kept staring straight ahead with that stupid-ass smug look on her face. And she did turn down that judge's offer, even though when she was in the hospital, she confessed to the murders in writing. It was in writing because she couldn't speak because of the self-inflicted neck wounds. But she said, quote, "I had to do everything and take care of the kids. I worked as a babysitter only, and she wanted me to do everything. She wanted 5 hours of cleaning every week," unquote. Hold up now. You putrid piece of petrified dog shit. You butchered 2 beautiful, helpless little kids because you had to work an extra fucking 5 damn hours a week. She could have asked for a fucking raise. She could have quit her fucking job. This case makes me want to go to prison in New York, if only for just a day. But anyway, Yoselyn Ortega was convicted, like I said, of 2 counts of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. That is the only time during the entire trial that she showed any real emotion. She did cry a couple tears, but only feeling sorry for herself. I, for one, hope the other inmates make her worthless ass suffer every single fucking day for the rest of her goddamn pitiful life. I'm glad that the Crims got some semblance of justice. I hope it brings them just a little peace. I must say, though, that is one amazingly strong family. I am sure something like this would break me to a point of no return, but not them. They held each other up through it all. They took care of Nessie. They had 2 more sons. They created the Lulu and Leo Fund, as well as a program that has helped over 2,500 underprivileged youth. It's called Choose Creativity. I'm going to read you a description that's as it's written on their Facebook page. Choose Creativity is powered by the Lulu and Leo Fund. The Lulu and Leo Fund is a 501c3 nonprofit that raises funds for Choose Creativity, its primary initiative. Choose Creativity empowers children and adults to build resilience, creative confidence, and social emotional skills through our Learn with Creative Confidence programs. We provide training and social emotional learning frameworks for educators and other professionals. Research has shown that creativity declines as we get older. Young people and adults must be engaged in activities where creativity and the creative process is modeled, taught, named, noticed, and embedded across learning processes and environments with conscious effort, forethought, and consistency. Being creative is not about being artistic. It's a mindset that we can practice and support. Choosing creativity helps us in school, at work, and in our homes across all parts of our lives. Now, I will have links to both Choose Creativity and the Lulu and Leo Fund in the description section of this video. Please go check them out and make a donation if you are able. This is their legacy. And now for the second story. Christine Laverne Slaughter was the youngest child in an unusual family, to say the least. Her father was a disgusting pervert named Thomas. He was 65 years old when she was born, and her mom, Anne, was all of 16 years old. Let that sink in. Anyway, the family was super poor, and it said that they never took Christine to the doctor for routine exams or any of the actual necessary child vaccinations or anything that she was supposed to get her eyes checked or so forth. They didn't do any of that. She was also considered mildly retarded because of her perceived low IQ, and I only say perceived because they never bothered to have her tested. Apparently, her parents argued often. They probably didn't have a whole lot in common. I mean, like, what could a 16 and a 65-year-old really have in common? But they mostly argued about money, or their lack thereof. Since the dad said he couldn't afford Christine, they would periodically send her away for other people to raise, and then bring her home, and then send her back away again, and she was never anywhere for very long. She lived in orphanages, as well as family members' homes, random people's homes, so forth and so on. As a young girl, it said she began torturing and killing small animals, mostly stray cats. Later, she said that she tortured cats to test the 9 lives theory, like they were some kind of fucking science project. She was twisted from a young age. September 1977, the 14-year-old Christine's parents forced her to marry a 20-year-old man, although that marriage ended up in divorce after only 6 weeks because they were constantly fighting. Afterwards, Christine became a hypochondriac, and she also had many episodes or fits, is what they're calling it, during the following 2 years. She had been hospitalized nearly 50 times, and doctors were never quite able to find a treatable condition. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, if anything. Obviously, it was psychiatric conditions, but it wasn't as well accepted or diagnosed back then, I guess. She said she had hallucinations. She complained of red dots that appeared before her eyes, and she heard voices. At the age of 16, she was diagnosed as incapacitated, which is the equivalent of today's diagnosis of disabled, though they had no idea of what, if anything, was actually making her that way. In order to make money, she began working as a babysitter for neighbors and friends, which is frightening on its own. Anyways, on February 28th, 1980, 2-year-old Cassidy Johnson dies. An autopsy listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the skull. Christine, who had been babysitting Cassidy at the time of her death, said Cassidy passed out, fell out of her crib, hit her head, and died. The attending physician did not believe Christine her story at all. And he wrote a note recommending that the police investigate Christina. However, this note was lost, and the police took Christine's account as the truth, and the case was closed shortly thereafter. Soon after Cassidy's death, Christine moved to Lakeland, Florida. 2 months later, in early summer of 1980, 4-year-old Jeffrey Davis died while in Christine's care. The autopsy pointed to myocarditis, which is a heart condition which is rarely fatal, but they cited that as his cause of death. 3 days later, his funeral was taking place, and Christine was asked to babysit Jeffrey's cousin, 2-year-old Joseph Spring, during the funeral. Joseph died a few hours later. Doctors diagnosed him with a viral infection and then noted that that virus may have caused the death of Jeffrey as well. July 1981, Christine left Lakeland and returned to her hometown of Perry in northern Florida. But word travels kind of fast, and very few families wanted to entrust their children to her care. So she got the idea and began to work as a nursing assistant and housekeeper for seniors. 77-year-old William Swindle died on his kitchen floor the same day that Christine started caring for him. They said, natural causes. Sure it was. That fall, the daughter of Christine's half-sister, 8-month-old, which would be her niece, half-niece, I'm not sure. She was 8 months old. Her name was Jennifer Daniels. She died. See, Christina's in a car with her half-sister and her half-sister's child, and her sister had to run in the store real quick. She left her daughter with Christine in the car just for a few minutes, but that few minutes was long enough that little Jennifer stopped breathing. Doctors suspected SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome, to be the cause of death, and case was closed. The death of 10-week-old Travis Coleman, who died on July 2nd, 1982, while Christine was taking care of him, would finally be what got her caught. At the autopsy, the doctors found internal injuries that could only be caused by suffocation. When the police questioned Christine to any kind of degree, at first, obviously, she was denying, but within a few minutes of feeling the pressure, she confessed to murdering 3 of the at least 6 people that had died in her care. She said she did it because she heard voices telling her, quote, kill the baby, unquote. She suffocated those 3 children with pillows and blankets and was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment for those 3 murders. In December 1982, because she had confessed, she was spared the death penalty. After serving 25 years in prison, she was eligible for parole. Thank goodness her application for parole was rejected by the parole board in November of 2017. Nobody even showed up to support her at that hearing. Poor dear. So sad for her. She's going to be given another hearing in 2025. Until then, she's locked up at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Ocala, Florida. And I hope they never let that crazy bitch out. Ever. Reported crimes against children happen way too often. The good news is, only about 3% of the reported cases each year are committed by babysitters. Bad news, one is that 3% is still too many. And the other bad news is not all cases are reported. There are children being abused every day by their caregivers and their parents still don't know. Some of them, the kids don't even know. They could be sleeping and pictures being taken of them. There's so many different types of abuse. The examples I spoke of today are extreme examples, but to me, all examples are extreme. I just want to get parents thinking again. Don't get too complacent. Don't get too comfortable with anybody watching your children. Always stay vigilant. That's going to be it for me for today. This is a tough one. They're all tough ones, but this one really got me. As a mom, it really got me. So I'm going to be back soon. I have another one already written up. I just gotta film it and edit, and I hope to see you back here as well. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Maybe hit like on the video. If you have any tips for keeping your children safe, or if you have any comments about the cases I just spoke of, please put it down in the comment section below. I always answer and respond to every comment left. I would love to have dialogue on the subject. And until I am back here and see you back here next time, I hope you all stay safe out there. Keep your kids safe out there. And I hope to see you soon. Thanks for watching.